Alexis Morgan, here we are.
Matt Todd, it's incredible. We've been talking about this and here we are.
I know. So we are literally in a different location. I have recreated my studio in the basement of a building downtown 2 blocks. Thank you to the state PTA, 2 blocks away from the Capitol. So we can actually talk to legislators in like real time, day of, and publish multiple episodes. I did one this morning with Director of Health and Welfare, Alex Adams, talked about foster care and all kinds of things that the state's doing. And here we are talking again.
Here we are. And people would never know if they're looking at your screen or if they're looking at my screen, because behind you is still the Godzilla and behind me is still the
the beautiful curtains.
The beautiful curtains. And I'm telling you, this is so awesome because you are the Idaho PTA legislative rep, and
Indeed.
you and I have like known each other for like over a year now, because you're my producer on my podcast too. And you were the one who came up with this idea. Which was, hey, wouldn't it be so awesome if legislators could talk in real time about their bills, if, different associations and different people who are, around these different bills could have real-time conversations instead of, reading about it in the newspaper, right, or those types of things.
Or not reading about it in the newspaper.
Or not reading about it.
Do you still get a newspaper?
I do, and I'm thinking about not, because we've actually stopped reading it. Like, as of late, I've stopped reading it, and in part because some of those stories are on the news now, and I talk with you and I'm pretty connected in some ways. And right. So, but I love the news. Let me be really clear. I love the news and I love what, I like being informed. That's why. Right. So you had this idea and there was like one potential iteration prior to this. And then you were like, that's not really going to work out. And I said, hey, the Idaho PTA has an office right down from the Capitol. What if you use the office for your podcast? And you were like, that's gold. Let's do it. And here we are. We made it happen.
God, that's great.
Let me be really clear. You've done all the legwork to make this happen. I pretty much pitched
You gave me the keys.
But I mean, I'm not like setting it up. I talked to the state board and pitched the idea, and they loved it. And the reason we love it is because Idaho PTA is we really care about getting information out to people. It's really important for us to have an informed public. And so that's why we are supporting your podcast, which is all about getting information out to people so they can be informed on the issues. And that's why we wanted to offer this resource to Idaho. So
God
here we
bless
are.
It. Again, I deeply appreciate it. I'm really excited about it. It kind of blows me away. The reception from the legislators as well has been super positive. People are like, oh yeah, like I'll come on down, because again, 2 blocks away, it's like, come on, let's do this. Let's make a true marketplace of ideas exist where people can come in, they can say, I'm, for this funding, I'm against this funding, I'm for this program, I'm against this program, whatever it is, but let's bring it to people in a way that they will willfully, voluntarily ingest it. It's not obligation. You can ingest it on your phones, like just tons of clips, right? I put out stuff. I'm actually planning on doing, hopefully when we get into full swing, like up to 2 or 3 episodes per day. And these are going to be shorter. So it's like 15, 20 minutes, or maybe even 10 minutes if it's a really short issue, but just hammer out the information so that somebody in Coeur d'Alene can ingest it. Somebody in Bonneville County can ingest it. Somebody, in Canyon, we all get the same information from the same reps, instead of just, if you're on an email list, great. Or what's far more likely, you have no idea what your state legislature is grappling with. And that's not great, right? Because one, you ultimately, people fall into apathy and they're like, whatever it is, what it is. It's like, no, that's not it, right? Or they don't care what I think, and like, no, that's not it either. Or you just become jaded and you're like, they're all out to get whatever they're out to get. It's like, or they're working on like water resource supplies, or they're working on, sweet corn seed deals, or they're like trying to stop, international bad actors from owning farmland. And they're working on things. You just don't know about it. That's not to say everybody's a workhorse, but there are some out there.
There are some out there, yes. And there's definitely like issues this legislative session that are like hot topic issues. There are issues that have already come up so far that almost appear to like want to make a splash. And then there are issues that like are pretty quiet and we just don't really hear about, but they get passed and, we move on. So
this year, 2025, the PTA, right? We're obviously very committed to education. Great. And as a legislative rep, I'm like, I love education. I think public education is really important. That's not to say it is perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And again, what are big things you as president, you've been paying attention to a lot of different things. What are big things this legislative session that you can kind of preview for people?
Well, the first one straight out of the gate is our bill. So the bill that you and I have been working on, you drafted, and we have found Senator Kevin Cook is going to be sponsoring that bill. And it's like in preparation right now. And that tech bill is all about helping make parents aware of the technology that their kids are being given by public schools. So we know that public dollars have been spent on technology that are in the hands of our kids. And we also know that many parents are not aware of the online safety limits of that computer. And I have shared on your podcast before of personal stories where I actually wasn't even aware. And you have shared stories where your kids have showed you like, hey, Dad, this is actually something I learned I could do on my computer. And you and I both are like, whoa.
Right.
And so as I traveled the state this last summer and spoke with parents, which were both PTA members and non-PTA members, because as the state PTA, we advocate for all Idaho kids. So I wanted to hear from all parents. This technology was an issue for parents. And so for me, I view this kind of as like a starting point. I think, you and I have mentioned that technology is going to be a long-term conversation.
Right.
And, the State Department of Ed is working on some different things that I'll get to in a minute, but our tech bill is something that you and I are both really proud of. Idaho PTA is really proud of. And we are really happy that this is really a nonpartisan issue, that people on both sides of the aisle agree that it is important for parents to be informed on the limits of the safety features of that computer.
Yeah. And it's, again, bottom line is, as Superintendent Critchfield said, she said, look, we rolled this stuff out. We were not responsible for the situation. We did the best we could over the last 4 or 5 years to make sure kids had the access to education. It happened quickly, and there are problems. And look, we gotta patch up those problems. But the first thing is reintegrating parents into the conversation, because most parents, myself included, right when I started digging into this at the end of 23, most people have no idea what their kids are doing on the school tech. They have no idea what the tech is capable of doing. They don't know how to keep their kids safe because they don't know what it's doing. So yeah, I'm really excited about this bill. That'll be a big one. There's the big guy though, the gorilla in the room.
Before you get to that one, I just want to talk about the other one, which I had actually mentioned on my own podcast. Had a conversation with Greg Wilson, who's the chief of staff for Superintendent Debbie Critchfield, and the conversation was all about the updating Idaho graduation requirements. And this is a big one because the grad requirements for high school students has not had a big overhaul in about 10 years. And so, 10 years have passed and a lot of things have occurred within 10 years.
Where were you in 2015?
I was living in New Hampshire. My husband was finishing his fellowship at the Dartmouth Medical Center, and then we were moving to Lewiston, Idaho. So my husband's a 5th generation Idaho and our kids are 6th generation. And so we already knew at this time in 2015, we already knew and were very excited about coming back to Idaho.
That's awesome. 2015, I was living in Danville, still doing one-on-one SAT prep. I had 2.5 kids. I was just getting on with but what a difference the world is. I was a baby. I was 32. What did I know at 32?
You're what did I know?
Anyway, so the point is overhauling is the world is so different than it was 10 years ago in 2015. I could understand an overhaul. So what are the big modifications? So, we're still doing math. Math is, you still want to get through calculus if you can or whatever.
Yeah. There were 4 points, but really kind of 3 big takeaways for me. Which is one, they want to make sure that students have an opportunity to really kind of individualize their experience while they're in school. And so that kind of looks like 2 different things. One, they want school districts and charter schools to create pathways for students. So those pathways look like actual charts where a student can see, hey, if I took these classes, I would receive this accreditation, along with my graduation certificate when I'm done. If I'm interested in, whatever you're interested in, doesn't matter. There are going to be pathways for students to be able to see visually. So that's more individual experience, right? There are things that the public school offers, but kind of like a roadmap. Sometimes we don't know until we see it. And Idaho has done such a good job of offering a variety of classes to students. And so now I view this as Idaho's opportunity to show our kids, these are the opportunities that you have. Let us lay this out in front of you so you can see. And then if you want to, you can choose something like that. You don't have to, but it's an option for you. So that's the first thing that they're proposing. And the state plans to provide a lot of those templates for local districts. It sounds like to me that one of the Department of Ed's goals is to remove the heavy lift that this is going to be for school districts. So that's good news. The second thing is that Superintendent Critchfield and her team want to make sure that districts and families understand that having out of classroom experiences that a lot of our students have, internship, apprenticeships, even, music lessons, FFA, FHA, those types of things, count those for credit. And they want to make it more explicitly clear in Idaho Code, and it's already in Idaho Code, that kids can get credit for these things. And Superintendent Critchfield was on my podcast. She and I were kind of talking about this a while ago, but she said, listen, we're not talking about going to Disneyland, walking 20,000 steps a day and getting PE credit for that. That's not what we're talking about. But what we are talking about is, hey, there might be some kids who take private music lessons, like for piano, and they're taking those lessons every week and they're practicing at home every day. She's saying count that for credit, and it's in Idaho Code right now, but they're wanting, I think, to expand that and make it a little bit more obvious and helping districts understand what can be offered for credit. So that's great too.
That is great. This, and again, that's an interesting thing because it's like, okay, maybe, for instance, let's use music. Maybe the neighborhood school that the kid goes to doesn't have a robust or even doesn't even have a music program. And so it's like, okay, I can rely on this private entity over here to get me public school credit. Interesting premise that we're going to keep touching on. What's the third one?
Well, so I'm going to go back to that thought for just a moment because it would look like this for me. All of my kids have taken in high school music. They've taken symphonic band, percussion, jazz band. And
I was in jazz band.
Yes.
I told you this. I was a trumpet player.
You're a trumpet player.
Big fan.
I got a trumpet player.
Big fan.
And so what this means then is that my trumpet player for 3 years has taken private lessons, and he takes those private lessons because he loves playing the trumpet so much, but he also is still in symphonic band. He does marching band and he does varsity jazz band. So, but at his high school, he is required to have so many electives. So he's going to get his symphonic band elective. He's going to get his jazz band elective, but he could also get that music lesson as credit. And that then what that does is today I heard a woman talk about how her son graduated at 16. We do have kids who are graduating high school early. And so what that does is allow a high school kid, if they want to, they're gathering electives as they go, right? They're having these different experiences. It allows them to meet all of those markers and then graduate and move on to the next thing if that's what they choose. So again, a very individualized experience.
That's awesome. Okay, and the third one.
Okay, so those are kind of like the two-for. That's the 2-for-1. That's why I say it's kind of, they say 3. I kind of more like it's 2-for-1 there. So for 3. So the second one is, hold on, let me get my head around this. It is updating the senior project. So some districts have really amazing senior projects. Some of them are kind of a bust. And so what they want to do is say, we want our kids to be future ready. So we want to have future ready projects. And we want our kids to have experiences in the community, whether that's like job shadowing, whether that's giving service, whatever that is. But we want our kids to have experiences that are going to help them for their future. In Lewiston, when I was a school board member up there, I also volunteered to be a judge during their senior project time. And kids up there were having projects like, there was a kid who was curious about being a nurse. And so his presentation was all about how he had done his 15 hours in nursing and done his research paper on nursing. And so then the final thing in Lewiston was to present it to a bunch of people. So you present it to judges. And I asked him, I was like, okay, so like, what do you want to do now? And he said, I know I do not want to be a nurse. I didn't like it. And my response to him was, that's amazing. you learned during wonderful experience time that you don't want to pursue
Right.
nursing. Like, that's
That's
great.
a terrible idea. Yeah.
But that's what it sounds like the state would like students to have. They want kids to have like future ready projects instead of senior projects. And so they're getting a little bit more specific. It's broad, but a little bit more direction for districts, which I think is, I'm like, we're just in support of. That's wonderful. The big thing then, the final one of these grad overhauls.
Could I make a small comment on that?
Yeah.
I really appreciate future ready projects because in considering why has public education come under fire so intensely over the last several years? And after considering this for the last couple of years, one of the biggest things, it's relevance. People feel that the schools are out of touch with relevance, right? And they criticize the classic, when will I ever use this, right? It's like trigonometry or something. It's like, okay, maybe you won't. But in the absence of articulatable relevance, that's a real problem, because you're like, well, you need to learn this just because. It's like, I don't really like that answer. And especially with an abundance of alternatives, it's like, well, I feel this is more relevant, or I feel this is more appropriate, or whatever. And Idaho has a very rich history of people who are saying, hey, look, I live in an agricultural setting. I intend to pursue agriculture. Like, this school is not relevant to me, or not relevant in the way that some people would think. So I'm just going to focus more over here. And, that's what they do. But again, my point is, relevance and having future ready projects. It's like, I'm not just going to make you do work. Like, I'm not going to make you do a senior project for the sake of a senior project because it's a heavy lift. And I'm just in it for the heavy lift. They're like, no, you're going to do a heavy lift, but you're also going to have a heavy lift that points you in some direction or deters you from a direction that you're going down, right? Like the nursing. It's like, you're not going down there now. And that was a viable future for you, right? And now you've eliminated that. So you have a clearer picture of your future. That's relevance to me. And the more relevance we can insert into people's lives in the public setting, the more relevant public education will be, the more supported it'll be. And again, that doesn't mean it won't continue to have problems, right? We're dealing with these gigantic systems, but relevance has to be at the center of every overhaul from here on out.
You're exactly right. And we live in a world where it's so important to be relevant, and it is important to be up to date. And our schools aren't going to look like they did in 1920, and they shouldn't, because it's 100 years later.
Right. Can I tell you, these chairs you got are fantastic, by the way. This is like the only noticeable difference between the shows. It's like, I have the crappy swivel, like $10 chairs. These are fantastic. Like, I love the arm things, the whole bit.
Isn't this great? Thank you. When I bought these, I was leaving the store. I was leaving TJ Maxx, and people were like, whoa, those are incredible chairs. And this woman was like, so where are you putting these in your house? And I was like, I'm not. They're going into my office at the downtown. And I was like explaining it, and she's like, that's really cool. I'm like, yeah.
Were you wearing that shirt when you were saying this? Because you should have been. You're like, they match my shirt, lady.
I know. Unfortunately, okay. I was not wearing this shirt.
Well, fortunately, you would have gotten snagged or dirty or something. TJ Maxx is disgusting. Anyway, number three.
So the big one, which has had like the most media and the most pushback, is the digital literacy course. So the state requires 29 core credits, and I can't remember if it's like 16 or 17. Now I'm going to say it wrong. Electives. And so those 29 core credits, the state requires, and so then districts have to carry out. And so what the state has proposed is that the communication requirement is going to be removed, and they're going to put digital literacy in its place. And what that means is that school districts still have the choice to require the communication course. But this digital literacy course, the purpose of it is to say, hey, to be relevant today, to be addressing the things that our kids need today, we need to be talking and teaching them about AI. We need to be teaching them about how to be good digital citizens. We need to teach them about the impacts of social media, right? Like, we need to teach all these things. I'm not aware of all of the different particulars that are going to hit in this curriculum, but I do know that the state went to great lengths to, when I say the state, I mean the Department of Ed, they went to great lengths to connect with all sorts of stakeholders around the state. And they contacted the state PTA and said, hey, like, we want to hear from parents too. So we offered this to our members. And there was an individual who said, I'd like to be at the table for that. And we were so happy to have her there, because she was able to share her voice and her concerns. And really the biggest concern, Matt, is that there is the communication requirement people are saying, well, we still want our kids to have these soft skills. This is where they're learning how to look someone in the eye and speech and all those things. And Greg Wilson and I had a really good conversation about that. And I told him that as a parent, if a teacher is doing it right, and there's so many that are, and I feel like I can say this as a former teacher and as a parent and as a volunteer in schools, they are teaching those durable soft skills already. The computers are closed. We're having, eye contact. Kids have to speak up, and speeches are being given, presentations are being given in other classes. So while I think that a communication requirement is really important, it's valuable and it holds value, we also know that I think they said that a third of Idaho students take speech, which is typically how that communication requirement plays out. They take that online. So they're not sitting in a classroom anyways.
Right.
So anyways, that is the digital literacy, and that's what they're going to be proposing. They've worked through it on the Department of Ed level. They have then, it was approved by the State Board of Education unanimously. And then the last step is to go to the legislature, the House Ed and the Senate Ed Committee, and present. And the legislature has to pass it in order for then it to become
one of the credit.
Yep.
Two things, but the first and most specific to this is I actually got a hold of Superintendent Critchfield. I was like, you didn't ask, and I will not be offended if you say no, but I would love to insert, or at the very least, make a commentary on part of the digital literacy curriculum, because I think it's really relevant. People talk about, I remember going through, like going to the library and understanding different types of sources and how relevant they are. I also remember the birth of, like, let's write an essay that has, footnotes that are a website. People were like, but what's the web? Like, how do you validate these things? This is like just some random, whatever. Those were all things that we were taught. But now people are ingesting so much social media, and I studied rhetoric when I was in college, and from a persuasive standpoint, and obviously I spent a whole dump truck of time all day, every day making content. From a persuasive standpoint, it's really interesting seeing how easily persuaded people are, just like left and right, by content that breaks like people are not identified as like expert. Like you have like a man on the street interview where somebody just says something, they're like, oh yeah, they're dumping like all kinds of aluminum across our skies or whatever it might be. It's like, who's this person? Like, I could say this too. People also make their own conclusions with things. One person regarding weather modification, very upset about it, very worked up about it, sends me this thing. And it's a clip on Instagram. It's a picture of an application to modify the atmosphere of the entire Earth. Okay. And it had like 1 million comments, people losing their mind. And it had this person's information. And I was like, that's a 415 area code. Why don't I text him? So I texted Luke and I was like, hey, is this Luke? And like, he texted me, he was like, yeah, this is Luke. I'm like, hey, Luke, I found this thing online. Like, what are you doing? And so this person that sent this to me is worked up that there's this cabal that's changing the weather of the entire Earth. And what it turned out is there's a dude named Luke that has a buddy, and you can donate to their nonprofit where they will put a little sack of like sulfur something or other onto a weather balloon and release it in your name and slowly dim the sun. This is the whole, I was like, wait, so okay. People donate to you and you take these donations and you get a weather balloon and you do a sandwich baggie of sulfur something, and you let that go up into the sky and like slowly dim the sun. This is your play. He's like, yeah, that's what we do. And once I told the person on Instagram, I was like, I just talked to Luke. It's literally 2 dudes like in North Carolina that are letting weather balloons go. And he was like, oh, it's that kind of thing. Digital literacy as an understanding something, I think at its core has to have a mechanism to help people understand, like, okay, the level of like, take a random piece of comment. You have like 4 to 6 layers of media in this that are all doing different things to you. You have the visual aspect of it. If you put it on mute, how does it look? because worse videos will play, worse looking videos. Generally, you think they don't play well, but if you put like a gritty filter on them, people think they like stood the test of time and they're from like the 90s and they're coming out of the archives. If you put creepy music in the background, the music is obviously ascribing emotion. Right. So it's forcing you to feel a certain way. If you put like House of Pain Jump Around versus like some creepy, Stranger Things music in the background, like you're going to feel different things instantaneously. So I can manipulate your emotions. I can manipulate your sentiment towards a video based on filters. I can put multiple different layers of content. All of these things will lead you, the viewer, to arrive at a certain idea at the end without any validity. Like, you didn't do anything. You just made up this feeling in somebody's head. And our youth and, adults need to understand this. It's like, I know she didn't ask, but like, this is my play for digital literacy.
Did she, what was her response?
I think I texted her and I think I got like a thumbs up. I don't know. She didn't ask. Like, I offered unsolicited recommendation on some random thing. For all I know, it's already in the digital literacy curriculum. I have no idea.
So here's the thing. I'm going to be following this session to see how this, the grad requirements play out. And so when there is, if it gets passed, they should, I imagine that you're connected. I will tell you that when I went to the meeting, like a presentation that the Department of Ed gave, Greg Wilson was there and a couple of other Department of Ed people were there. When they gave their presentation, when it was over, I went up and said, hey, here is a book, here's a website.
Here's a thing.
Here's a couple of things that I think would be so helpful for this digital literacy course. And they took it down. He was like, oh my gosh, yeah, thanks. Because to the point, they're not experts on some of these things. And so anyways.
Yeah. The other thing, you're talking about a curriculum modification or core requirements. People lost their minds over, or not everybody lost their mind, but people got really worked up over the PragerU situation with the State Department of Ed. And it was like, listen, the PragerU was just the marriage of PragerU and the State Department of Ed really just said, hey, some of this curriculum school districts can elect to have this in their schools. And the school board, it's my understanding, the school board makes that determination what the curriculum is. And it was just saying, hey, PragerU has this swath, not everything PragerU has ever done, but it has a certain collection of stuff, curriculum, that we say, if you would like to have that in your school district, you can do that. It is not forcing that content on anyone. It is not requiring that parents do this. Like, it's just saying, hey, let's say 10, right? Like, these are the 10 curriculum options, and we're going to make an 11th, but that's not forced on it. Like, you guys still have to pick between the 11, and you, presumably the elected school board members that represent your community, duly elected by the people, you have the burden of selecting which of these 11 you want. And if you select the wrong one, or the community feels like it's not reflective of what they want, they can vote you out. But that's at the core of it, what happened, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what, people, Superintendent Critchfield, they went in, the Department of Ed, they approved, that particular thing that you're talking about. And what's really important for people to understand is the state does not dictate the curriculum that your local district has. The state gives, 5 or 7 options of curriculums that you can choose from. And then a local district chooses chooses which one they want. And I will tell you that I have not looked into it, but I am sure that the curriculum that a school district is using, maybe in a metro, in Treasure Valley, is not going to be the same the same curriculum that a small rural school district is going to choose. I had a conversation with parents out in Cambridge, and they were telling me that the parents and the school board and district administrators worked really closely to kind of go through some curriculum and make sure that they picked the one that was going to best represent the values of their community. And what I heard in that was that they were working together as a school community to determine what was best for their community kids. And I loved it. I was like, that is so amazing that your school community is coming together for that. That's, to me, what Idaho is about.
That's awesome. Okay. Yeah. Can we get to the big one, though? The big one, the hot mess. Come on.
Yeah. We can. Yeah, we can.
This was supposed to be a 20-minute episode. And now we're easily 45 minutes.
No, we're not.
Oh, we have to be. It's already noon.
No. I don't know when we started.
I can tell you because I refilled my meter. It was right around, you got here at 10:45. We started just after 11.
We did not start just after 11.
Maybe it was
Todd.
11:15. I don't know what to tell you. The big one. Go.
The big one. Okay, so this session, the vouchers are a big thing, and there are so many different. There are many legislators who want to get vouchers passed this session. They are determined to get it passed this session. We've got. It has been stated in the newspaper that Representative Wendy Horman, she's determined to get it passed this session.
And to be very clear, vouchers or a tax credit or whatever, like when we say or when you say vouchers, you're just saying you're taking some amount of state funding to be following the student, whether they're in a charter school, public school, or private school. And that means the state funds private school tuition.
Yes. So I just want to finish with that. Even, like Speaker Mike Moyle, he is determined to get this passed this session. And so what I think is really important for people to know is that, to your point, some people are calling them vouchers. The people who are for vouchers are saying it's not vouchers. We are offering a tax credit. And what is really important is to kind of get on. I don't know that we're going to be able to get on the same level when we're talking about this, money, because basically people are trying to package it a little bit differently. And so it's so important for Idahoans to understand what they're talking about. So to your point, we could be talking, basically what we're saying is that we are going to be using, they are proposing to use public dollars to give to people to use for private schools. That is what they are proposing. And or to use it in however they want. If you're pulling your kid out of public school, you can have money for that. That's what they're saying. And it is for a $5,000 tax credit. So they're calling it a tax credit. They're saying this isn't a voucher. What they're saying is a voucher is when I heard someone talk about it last night. Right. A voucher is when you sign up for, like, let's say a private school, and the state sends a check to that school. Okay, well, we're talking about a scenario there. So ultimately what we are what is being spoken about is a voucher type system. And what I think is important to note are a couple of things. I heard a gentleman speak today, Dr. Josh Cowan. He was at the Idaho Business for Education Legislative Academy. It was really awesome. This is like the second presentation I have heard in the past 3 days regarding vouchers. Senator Cody Galloway gave an information session on Monday evening with two individuals, one who was against basically vouchers and one who was for vouchers. And it was a great opportunity to listen to them and to hear them answer questions. So what I think is really important to note is that Idaho PTA, we are all about advocating for Idaho kids and what is best for Idaho kids. And what we have seen in the data and what has been presented nationwide and even by Josh Cowan today, who is Dr. Josh Cowan, who is an expert on vouchers and has been studying them. I think he said since like 2005 is when he began. So a really long time. This guy, we can safely say that he is an expert. He basically said that vouchers are a fad. They're a fad. And they have come in. It's a nationwide conversation. It's happening nationally. And what is really important to note, and I loved how he said it. He said vouchers are a fad, and there's no such thing as free lunch. And there is going to be payment that is due. And basically what has happened is that Governor Little, in his State of the State address, stated that there is going to be a $50 million line item. And he kind of left it a little bit vague. But what he did was open the door for many of these proposals that are going to come. And there's going to probably be a couple. I know that Representative Wendy Horman and I think Senator Den Hartog are working on one together. And theirs is they're calling it a tax credit, and it's going to be $5,000. And they are saying that it is going to be given to families who are on the lower socioeconomic level first. That's going to be that. And then it's going to be a little bit more first come, first serve then after that, I think. And it's, there's going to be some different criterias in there regarding that. And there's going to be a lot of information that comes out regarding these tax credits. I mean, they're called tax credits. They're called educational savings accounts, ESA. Right. or vouchers. And what is really interesting, the data that is out there is that these types of tax systems are not beneficial to students. Actually, the people that they benefit the most are students who are already in private schools and wealthy families. And
that's played out, and I don't mean to interrupt, but that played out with I had an interview with a gal by the name of Andrea Gremmert, about a year or two ago. She's a homeschooling mom, has 4 kids, and it's amazing. The homeschool community that I've interacted with are really against vouchers or credits or anything like that. They believe in public education. They also want to make sure, I think a bit of the anxiety is like, well, they will start applying this to homeschool families, and then they're going to have in their hands on what you're doing because they're giving you money, right? Like strings are, as you're articulating, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Like if I give you $1, there's going to come, like there's no example in like the history of the world with government where they're like, we're just going to give this money because money, right? It's like, no, there's a string attached. And Andrea Gremmert, in our conversation, which was fantastic again, she brought up statistics from Arizona, and I believe it was something like the same idea, the same sentiment was that we are going to pass a government funding system for private school because we need to elevate people that are in lower socioeconomic groups or in worse public schools out of that and allow them access to more expensive private schools. But what they found out is, I believe 97% of the students that did indeed take the money and use it for private school, either A, already going to that private school, or B, were coming from higher performing public schools. So only, I believe 2.5% of the recipients of this money that took the money, left the public school and went to a private school, were coming from public schools that were lower end. So it really, the target of like, hey, we have to do something for the students that are in bad schools that don't have very much money, they only hit 2.5% of that target. The other 97.5%, they were either at the private school already, or they were going to a good school and they just left.
Yes, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because the homeschool community, by and large, is not in support. What I've read and what I've heard from different people, and I'm actually having one of them on, I'm having a homeschool advocate on my podcast coming up. They don't support these because Idaho is like kind of one of the premier states in homeschooling.
Yes.
Where there's not regulations on it. You can just you don't have to report, which is why actually we don't know the exact number of kids who are in homeschool, because homeschool families don't have to report.
Right. They just don't register.
Right. So a couple of things that I think are really important to note that I want to share with you. One, $5,000 is not going to cover the tuition for a private school. It's not going to cover that. And one of the reasons—
I know a lot of private schools, and I'd agree with you. I don't know any that have a $5,000 tuition.
No. I would say that on minimum, it's roughly about $10,000.
Yes.
Okay. So that's one thing to note. Second, it's important to note that of all of the states that have voucher type systems, not one of them has ever stayed within their initial cap of their limit.
Right.
They're all over. Utah, which hasn't even, I think I read, and I'm not 100% sure, but maybe they haven't fully instituted theirs yet. They're like 3 times over what their budget is going to be. Right. So
I believe the same thing happened with Arizona, though I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. So what is important to note is that when we are talking about fiscal responsibility, and let me be really clear, I am a Republican. I am very much I lead a nonprofit where we are so financially responsible to our members, and it's so important for us to be that. This voucher system is not that. And that is something that really seems to be puzzling me as someone who follows legislation, who advocates for kids, and who hears from my Idaho Republicans that they value fiscal responsibility. A voucher system is not that. And then kind of the last thing that I think is really important to note is that in our Idaho Constitution, it acknowledges in 2 places where it says that Idaho is responsible to basically provide a free education for all kids. And I just recently heard this and I loved this. If anyone wants to change the Constitution, you have to go to the voters to do that. And so ultimately, what legislators are kind of attempting to do really is kind of skirt that a little bit. And my question is, what's the fear? Why do you fear going to voters on this issue? And what we know actually is that data has shown that and I heard this today, that in the states where lawmakers took it to the voters, I think there were 3. It was Nebraska, Kentucky, and Colorado, which all are 3 different, like Democrat,
way different.
different.
Yeah, right.
They all shot down the voucher system. And what's interesting is that in Kentucky, 65% of voters voted they voted against the voucher system. 65% of Kentucky voters voted against the voucher system. That same 65% voted for Donald Trump in the election. So it really isn't like a Republican Democrat issue. It kind of weaves along. It's not like one group really wants it over the other. And I think what the Kentucky example shows is that we have Republicans who don't want the voucher system. And I think it's important for us to like shout that from the rooftops, that just because someone might be just because you're a Republican in Idaho and you're hearing maybe several Republican lawmakers say they want this voucher system, does not mean that you have to want this voucher system. That actually, if you think about what is best for your school community, it's not the voucher system. And I heard a mother today who is from Florida, and she is also a PTA member. She spoke about how really the voucher system is ruining Florida schools. And she gave example after example after example of that. And she talked about how her local school, one of the reasons that her community school is so important, like so wonderful, is because community members have invested in that school, because the teachers there, the parents there, the kids there, the community members there are investing in that school. And vouchers are going to kind of, come and go. But the decisions that we make to invest in our kids, those have a lasting impact. The actions that we take for our kids have a lasting impact. And at Idaho PTA, we care about all Idaho kids. And I do know that 70% of our school districts are rural, and that we do have a large group of children throughout the state of Idaho that are on free and reduced lunch, that are in families where parents are working really hard to take care of them. And I know that those families do not have the option of a private school in their area. And we actually know data shows, like even out of Florida, that those areas that do not have private schools generally don't get private schools, even if they're offered this. I did hear a gentleman say, well, it's going to give people an option. Maybe these pop-ups are going to happen. Well, we have data that shows that the pop-ups are no good for these kids either, that the school quality is so low. So it's not going to be beneficial on that round. So what's really interesting to me, Matt, at the end of the day, when we look at the voucher system and we look at the information that is presented in front of us, we know that it is not a financially responsible decision to invest in vouchers. We know that, 90, I think it's about 90% of Idaho kids are in the public school. And we know that those kids who are already being sent to private schools, those families can afford to have their kids there. They're already paying for it. We know that $5,000 is not going to cover the fee of the private school. And we also know that, what was I going to say? Dang it, it's gone. You know when that happens.
Yeah, no, it's good. Listen, I really appreciate your perspective on this. I have spoken with, obviously, I've had Representative Moyle on, Mike Moyle, several times, Lori Den Hartog. I'm hoping to have her back on as well. I've never spoken with Wendy Horman, excuse me.
Yeah, and Wendy Horman, she is a former school board member. She is a former Idaho School Boards Association president, and she is from the Idaho Falls area.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope you have her on.
I hope so too.
I hope she comes on.
Let's help me connect with her. I'm sure you know this woman.
I do. I've actually met her before. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, and these are really important things. And
I remember what I was going to say. Sorry. The last thing is, and we know that the homeschool community, when we're talking about these different groups of people, when we talk about the private school families who are already affording it, we know the public school kids who are there, and then we know that the homeschool community is not in support of vouchers. The last thing, So why are we doing vouchers? I actually heard, I read in a news article on Idaho Ed News that Wendy Horman said that she cares about all Idaho kids. And I'm not going to question what what Representative Horman says that she cares about. Because she said, you know what? When we talk about accountability for public schools, she said that state testing was not a good form of accountability. That she thought that attendance was a better form of accountability. And I agree with her. I say, listen, I don't necessarily think that state testing is the most wonderful thing. But instead of diverting public funds to private schools, my suggestion is that we work on the public schools and we make them better for Idaho kids, and we sit down at the table and we have the hard conversations that need to be had to make our public schools better for your kids, Matt, for my kids, and for all the other kids in Idaho. Because I'm telling you right now, Idaho kids deserve it. They deserve for the adults to sit down at the table and to make it better for them. That's what Idaho kids deserve.
God bless you, woman. Thank you for coming in today.
You're welcome.